I would like to read out a short essay slash Facebook post. It's an essay that was posted as a Facebook post that I came across, that actually a podcast listener tagged me on Twitter. It is about how we treat kids, unsurprisingly. So I'll just read out I'll read out the post. So someone asks, okay, so essentially the author of the post, Duncan Sabien, he has like an anonymous form that you can send him questions on his website. And someone said to him, I'm in my 20s, I don't know anyone with children above toddler age, and I haven't really interacted with any children since I was a child. What if people in my demographic forgotten about children? What will surprise us if we come to start interacting with children again? So someone asked Duncan this, and I'll just read out the post. For those who don't know me very well, my qualifications to opine on this issue are thus. 1. I've been a teacher more or less continuously since I was 14 years old, since the year 2000, and the vast majority of my teaching experience was with children mostly between the ages of 11 and 14, but also with kids as young as 5 or 6, and with older teens and adults. 2. When I was 6 years old, I swore a solemn oath to myself that I would never forget that even though I was only 6, I was a person, damn it, with real thoughts and real feelings and real opinions, and I deserved to have that recognized instead of having it hand-waved away with patronizing condescension, Miss Wickerson. As a result, I've stayed more in touch with children and with what it was like to be a child than most people, mostly via actively trying to the point where I think I can easily claim to be 99th percentile among people in their mid-30s when it comes to understanding, validating, empathizing with, and relating to the experience of childhood, and possibly as high as 99.99th percentile. In particular, I have a lot of carefully catalogued and in many cases externally verified slash double checked memories of watching the people around me transition from trusting and validating and respecting themselves at the time to mysteriously dismissing and marginalizing and belittling those very same selves months or years later. I've watched friends and family do a kind of episodic shift where they're suddenly talking smack about and dunking on a person, the person being past them in the past, that I knew and admired and respected, as if present them is somehow fundamentally, qualitatively different or better. And in many cases, I can just straightforwardly see that this is not true. I noticed myself spiraling away from the actual question, though, so to refocus, things that 20 and 25 and 30 and 35-year-olds who haven't been a kid for a while and haven't interacted with kids for a while and who've sort of drunk the basic cultural Kool-Aid of forgetting what it was like include, but are not limited to, 1. Kids are exceptionally robust. 2. Kids are fully realized persons. 3. Kids and their reactions to things 100% make sense. And 4. Kids care. And so for each of these 4 things, he's written something. So 1. Kids are exceptionally robust. We're used to thinking of kids as fragile because they tend to get triggered pretty easily. Kids have less emotional self-regulation on average and are more likely to melt down or throw tantrums or pick fights. On a minute-to-minute level, kids seem much more destructible and vulnerable than teens or adults. But when it comes to being able to handle curveballs, being able to bend and then spring back into shape, being able to absorb hits and somehow put it together and still end up as fully functional human beings, kids are way less brittle than grown-ups. The thing that makes injury or abuse of children so horrible is that they're figuring out how the world works. And if you show them that the world is a cold and unfeeling place, they'll just adapt to that, and that's a worse way to live. But in terms of sheer raw ability to cope, kids are incredibly robust. This particularly pops up for me when I see parents stridently and vehemently objecting to having their children exposed to truths about the world, such as the fact that people are sometimes violent, or that drug addiction and homelessness leave devastating effects on individuals and communities, or that, did you know, people sometimes do this sex thing. There seems to be some imagined perfect innocence that A, ought to be preserved, and B, will, when it's lost, incur injury. Like once you find out these things, you're suddenly going to be worse off than when you were lied to about how the world works. Nope, nope, nope. I have a list of movies and books and experiences with ages attached. My kids are going to see Fight Club when they're 12 rather than being protected from the violence and sexuality until they're 16 or whatever. Let's hold off on these disappointing blows to one's worldview until they're old enough and robust enough to handle it, is the steel man of the other side. But in practice, I think it's, let's hold off on these disappointing blows to one's worldview until they've built up a lot more assumptions and coping mechanisms around the fake way that the world doesn't work, and also they've lost a lot of their youthful flexibility and regenerative ability. So to add my own commentary, he's basically trying to say that he disagrees with sheltering kids from some of the harsher realities of life, because when they're young, they can actually cope with those things pretty well. All right, two. So that was one. Kids are exceptionally robust.
I
Two.
mean, so just on that point, someone hearing that might uncharitably interpret it as, "What? There's no way." Well, so you're saying I should show my child R-rated films when they're 6 years old? What do
Well,
you imagine
well,
would be Duncan's response to that?
he's personally saying that he'd show his kid Fight Club when they're 12. So no, not R-rated films when they're 6 years old, but Fight Club at 12 rather than Fight Club at 18. Two, kids are fully realized persons. This one comes with some caveats since A, developmental stages are at least somewhat real, and B, people grow at different rates. But often by the time a person is 5 or 6, and usually by the time they're 9 or 10, and almost always by the time they're 12 or 13, what you have when you are dealing with a kid is a complete, complex, whole, real person. Not like somebody who's going to be a person when they grow up, but a person. They will react to stimuli in approximately the same way you'd react to stimuli. If they're being patronized or condescended to, then they're just going to go, fuck this guy, and tune you out. If they're being treated with respect and curiosity, they're going to open up and will reveal an inner life of opinions and beliefs that's every bit as rich and complex as anyone else's. The key thing to note is that kids are tired of getting the short end of the stick from adults, so they won't often visibly or vocally push back against being treated like mice. They'll just retreat. They'll stop bothering to try to interact with you or equal or with you on equal or near equal footing, and will just act like mice around you. They're pretty good as a class at fulfilling expectations and then leading their own private lives outside of your sight. If you want to see the real person hiding behind the child exterior, you first have to demonstrate that you're deserving of it. Anecdote, I was having a frank conversation with my homeroom students one day, and they straight up confessed as a group to frequently and deliberately manipulating my colleague Susan by pushing her known buttons. Uh, and this is in quotes. If we don't feel like working, we just pull up something from Google News and ask her about it, and she goes off on a rant, and then we don't have to do any work that day. End quote. This wasn't random childish behavior. This was exactly the same sort of strategic behavior you see from, say, office drones in The Office or Office Space TV shows. It was the same sort of response you might get out of a mature, reasonable adult if they were trapped in a context where they weren't going to get any value and didn't have any reason to buy into the system. All right, so that was two. Kids are fully realized persons. Three, kids and their reactions to things 100% make sense. Kids aren't random. Kids aren't crazy. Kids aren't incomprehensible. Kids lack experience. They lack context. They have vast holes in their understanding of how the world works. This causes them to make leaps that don't make sense to someone who has richer or more accurate assumptions. This causes some of their choices to seem really weird if you can't let go of your preconceptions. This causes their reactions to be disproportionate. But it takes extremely little digging before you get to an underlying model that perfectly explains whatever nonsense you just witnessed. Sometimes, sure, kids just get a wild idea in their heads and run with it, and the underlying model is just, I don't know, it seemed like it would be fun. But often, if a kid is furious, if a kid is emotional, if a kid is weirdly fixated on trucks or dinosaurs or climate change, if a kid seems stridently insistent that we absolutely must do X, if you just look, you'll find the reasons why. Or rather, if you just look and you haven't already gotten yourself written off, you'll find the reasons why. This is part of the trap. If you haven't built up sufficient trust to overcome the default skepticism that most kids rightly have towards adults in general, then you'll try to look for reasons and the kid won't open up, thereby confirming that there was no underlying model and that kids are just crazy, which further pushes the two sides apart. So the point he's making here is a point that I made on one of the earlier podcasts about the topic, which is that if kids seem to have weird views on things or think sort of seemingly stupid things, it's not because they can't think correctly. It's just that they're missing some facts, and the model that they have of the world makes perfect sense given the facts that they currently know. And so you can't really, we often confuse a lack of knowledge with a actual, stupidity or something.
Okay, yeah.
So that was three. Kids and the reactions to things 100% make sense. And four, kids care. I include this one at the end because it's the least likely to surprise you, but also it seems worth mentioning and reinforcing. Kids care. Kids care about different things, and they're not all motivated by the same stuff, but they care a lot. Kids take things seriously. Kids take models seriously. They're trying to figure out how the world works, and they'll often jump straight to logical conclusions or carry out reasoning much further than adults expect, and then they will care about the result. They often haven't learned that the world is messy and confusing and full of gradients and shades of grey. So they haven't learned to give up on things like certainty and hope and clear lines between right and wrong. So don't be surprised if you tell a kid X and they leap straight to therefore Y. And don't be afraid if you tell a kid X and they respond with, but you're doing this thing which is emphatically not X. What's up with that? Man, I could go on for a long time. I should stop here. Anyway, that's the post. So I guess there were like the 4 points were: one, kids are exceptionally robust; two, kids are fully realized persons; three, kids' reactions to things 100% make sense; and four, kids care. Um, I think the fully realized persons thing. I mean, obviously, I'm fully bought into that, and I've been harking on about that. But I think the thing he mentions about if a kid is like patronized or condescended to, they're just going to tune the other person out, and sort of they have completely sort of whole and rich inner lives of their own, and the fact that adults don't know about this is just because kids generally don't trust adults to welcome them into their world, and I think I felt this quite strongly growing up. And there was this sort of kids world, and then you sort of there was like the adults world, and you sort of interacted with adults in a certain way, but it was out of the question that like they would be understanding of the kids world. Or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, when we used to go to like family gatherings and stuff, there would very much be an adults versus kids divide. And I remember sort of that framing of the kid will become a mouse like really resonated with me because I was like, yeah, I guess around adults when I was younger, I basically used to be a mouse and be like, look, I
Right.
just want to do the bare minimum. I want to say salams. I want to shake your hand, and then I want to go up to the kids where we're actually having fun. Even in school, like the teachers that we as kids most respected were the ones who felt like they most respected us. The ones who felt like they were speaking to us kind of on our level and like leveling with us, like man to man, rather than parent to child.
Right. Yeah.
And those were the teachers that we would let into kind of the a bit more of the inner work of the inner world of the kids.
Are you thinking about primary school here or secondary school or what?
I'm thinking both. So yeah, I mean, this is a good essay. Make some good points. I think you and I broadly agreed with them.
Yeah. I'm not sure we have much more to add, but I just wanted to read that out.
Nice.